Okay, well, welcome everyone. Good afternoon. This is the inaugural first meeting of the Eel-Russian Project Authority. My name is Corey O'Donnell and I'm with the Sonoma County Council's office, and I have the pleasure of calling this meeting to order today. The first item on the agenda, so we could proceed with the business of this authority, is the selection and appointment of officers. So at this point, I would solicit any nominations from the board for the chair. Ms. Polly.
Yes, I'd like to nominate Supervisor Rabbit to be the chair, the first chair of IRPA.
I'll second that and nominate Janet Pauley as the vice chair.
All right. Any further questions or comments on that nomination? Any comments from the public on the motion before us for chair and vice chair? Seeing none, I'll bring that back to the full board, and with a voice vote, since we're all present, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And with that, I will hand the gavel that I am not holding over to Director Rabbit. Congratulations to Director Rabbit and Vice Chair Pauley, and I hand the gavel to you.
Thank you very
Now
much,
maybe
Corey.
we can do introductions.
Yeah, we should do that. I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here. Thank you for that, and going forward, and thank you for your patience as we get going. We apologize for the weather today and the trip south, but as we all know, it's feast or famine with our the rainfall around here. But today is going to be filling up some reservoirs if there's room, so that's a good problem to have. Perhaps we can do a quick introductions of ourselves, and I'll start down here, please. And if you just push the little red light, you're on.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is James Ress, and I am the administrator for Round Valley Indian Tribes, formerly the president of the Council of Round Valley Indian Tribes.
Good afternoon. I'm Glenn McGordy, First District Supervisor, Mendocino County, and retired wine growing plant science advisor from the University of California Cooperative Extension for Mendocino and Lake counties.
And I'm David Rabbit. I'm a director of the Sonoma County Water, as well as the supervisor here in Sonoma County, and very happy to be part of this collaborative moving forward. Janet?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Janet Pauley. I chair the Mendocino County Inland Water and Power Commission, and I'm also a director on the Potter Valley Irrigation District Board.
My name is James Gore. I'm a Sonoma County supervisor and longstanding involvement coordinator on all this stuff. So it's a pleasure to see all you. President Russ, I'll still call you that. As we move over to administrator, I really want to thank you for being here, for the partnership, and just for clarity for everybody. And is that we have two supervisors from Sonoma County here, but one is representing Sonoma Water. Supervisor Rabbit is also on the WAC, the Water Advisory Council, as an appointment from our Board of Supervisors. And then Mendocino County, just I think, maybe you guys could explain, but we don't, it's two appointment spots for Mendocino County Inland Water and Power, correct?
Right. We have 2 votes on this board, and Supervisor McGordy and I have been appointed as the first representatives of the Mendocino County Inland Water and Power Commission.
I guess through the chair, if I would just say, a question is, when we get to informational briefings, I know we have a lot on the consent calendar. I just wanted to see if council could give a little bit more of a briefing on or just a high level on the agreement itself of who are the signatories, who are the participants, and how that works, now or later, whatever.
Okay, I think we'll have time for that as we move down, if that's okay with, and we'll make sure we come back to that. I do note that, and just so the public knows, and on the vote requirements, I think it's important to know, per the joint exercise of powers agreement, items require a majority vote for the board, including affirmative votes of at least one representative from each of the following: the Mendocino County Inland Water and Power Commission, and either Sonoma County Water Agency or the County of Sonoma. But I suspect that we're going to be very collaborative as we go forward, and we'll undoubtedly be full of consensus. I also want to make note too, on the selection of officers, there is one final officer that we need to appoint, and that is secretary. And for the time being, I recommend appointing Sonoma Water as the interim or initial secretary until we figure out how to move in a new direction, or if we want to move from that. But just to get us through this meeting and undoubtedly preparing for the next, look to my colleagues to see if there's any questions, comments, or concerns over that. And if not, can I get a motion to have Sonoma Water serve as the secretary for the board?
So move.
Great.
Second.
And again, with a voice vote, all those in favor of that, please say aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? Seeing no one opposed, that does pass unanimously with all present. Approval of the agenda is next on there. And I just one quick note, because I know that there's a slight change on 5D to add some additional names. I'm going to turn that one back to Corey so she can make sure we read that into the record.
Would you like me to do that now before you approve the agenda or when we get to consent?
Good question. Why don't you do that now?
Okay.
So that we, since I made the introduction and we want to go backwards.
Absolutely. Item 5D on your consent calendar is a resolution designating negotiators for the purpose of negotiation over acquisition of portions of the Potter Valley project from PG&E and designating certain staff for purposes of representing the authority and preserving attorney-client privilege. Mistakenly, the Round Valley Indian Tribes Council was left off of the list. That was just an oversight. So we would be adding to designated representatives, Erica Costa and Curtis Berkey.
Great. Any questions on that? And again, I'll look to my colleagues to look for a motion to approve the agenda with that slight change.
I move
Great.
the amended agenda
I'll
for
second.
approval.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second, and again, looking for a voice vote. Ask all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Hearing no one opposed, that does pass unanimously. We do have introductory remarks by Board of Directors, and I'll turn it to my colleagues to see if there's anything we need to add at this particular point in time. Glenn, can I turn to you first?
Well, thank you. This is just really an amazing development that we're sitting here. And I really thank everybody who's worked so hard for this opportunity, including our partners in the Round Valley Indian Tribe. And I have the distinct pleasure of representing both the Eel River Basin and the Russian River Basin, because my district goes across the hills into both. And I care very much about the well-being of all the resources, including people in these two basins, and look forward for us moving ahead to create a sustainable and resilient source of water that takes care of us all and all things in nature. Thank you.
Thank you. Russ?
Once again, good afternoon. I'd just like to start by saying, Round Valley Indian Tribes has been involved with these water issues for many, many years. The last few years, we've worked very closely with some of the agencies that are represented, and it's been a good journey. It's been a good path forward. I think we all came together in good faith, and we worked together, toward the end to look for basically what we're calling a two-basin solution. We're still looking at those areas, but the tribe also, I was appointed by our council to be here. And so we still need to make sure that we're looking at our interests too, as a tribal nation. And so, I respect each one of the folks up here and all of the ones that we've worked with over the past few years, because they've been very straightforward in coming forward and talking with us and having these good discussions. So I look forward to having and looking at what the path forward is for this ERPA board. And just looking forward to being positive and trying to see what's going to work for all of us.
Great. Thank you. Jen?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Russ. I want to call you President Russ. I'm sorry, Mr. Russ. I want to say just a couple of words about the Mendocino County Inland Water and Power Commission. For those of you who don't know, we are a joint powers authority, and our represented agencies are Mendocino County Water Agency, the City of Ukiah, Redwood Valley County Water District, the Potter Valley Irrigation District, and the Mendocino County Russian River Flood Control and Water Conservation Improvement District. I love doing that one. And I'd also like to parrot what Mr. Russ said about this partnership that we've been engaged in, which we have been engaged in now for quite some period of time. And I think in an effort to, as the language of this new entity states, as our purpose is to make sure that everyone understands that our job is to coordinate and implement a project that allows Eel River water to continue to be imported into the Russian River watershed while advancing habitat protection and habitat creation within the Eel River Basin. And today, I hope with the formation of this new Eel-Russian Project Authority, we've taken the first steps. I hope we will be very successful and that we will be able to succeed with a united regional effort to attain those stated goals.
Great. Thank you very much. Director Gore.
Yeah. What a long, strange trip it's been. And I've only been doing this for 15 years or 12, or I look over and I think about sitting here with Supervisor Carrie Brown when I first got elected and her talking about many decades of all of you working on this. And, you know, I say a long, strange trip because we've been in and out of this seriously for a better part of a decade. And to be able to sit here with you all and have not just some kind of entities that didn't quite make it, like the Eel-Russian River Commission that was built for different purposes. We tried to wedge this conversation into there, and then to have it be under the Huffman ad hoc two-basin solution, and then the sidebar conversations with Congressman Thompson and sidebar conversations with Lake County and us and everyone. I think I'm just very happy that we're here today with a rational way forward that isn't going to be easy, but is real and it's practical. And so more than anything, I just want to honor what Administrator President Russ said, which is, you know, having a tribal partner here, which is a sovereign nation, and understanding that as county governments, you have a direct government to government relationship with the federal government. I just want you to understand that is understood, it's respected, it's acknowledged, and we'll follow, we'll walk appropriately on that. To have you here with us as a member here is extremely important to achieve a two-basin solution. And all I expect here is for everybody to put all of their own interests on the table to figure out what the cumulative interest is that we can reach. And so what does that mean? I think a lot of people always question it, like it's actually pretty simple. We still want to be able to continue a diversion in an appropriate way that's friendly to fish and habitat, taking water at a time when it's appropriate, not when it causes harm on the other side. We want to expand efforts for restoration in the eel, as Director Pauly said. And on this side, we want to make sure that we continue the restoration work we're doing on the Russian and the communities that need. So we want to do something that's practical, that honors the reality of the now and the future. This is not just a water grab. This is figuring out a complex issue. And as they always say, is whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting over. I think we're not really interested in fighting here right now. It's great to sit here also, though, with a presentation that's going to come forward in a minute that is also not just those of us with this regional entity, but also has Humboldt and others signed on to a solution that we are working towards honoring and achieving. So, and then at the same time, there's conversations with Lake County on how to support what happens there with the decommissioning of Scott Dam and Lake Pillsbury, and make sure that we're supportive of the future for that community as well. So trying to do what's right. Thank you.
Appreciate that very much. And just echo the comments of my colleagues here and the excitement moving forward and certainly the collaboration with our tribal partners, with our partners, the county to the north of us, really trying to make sure that we have that two-basin solution that better that improves both simultaneously, the Eel and the Russian, to make sure that we can continue to work in that collaboration. So very grateful. If it's okay with everyone, we'll move on then to the consent calendar. The consent calendar today there's 4 items, A through D. And to note that's the revised D, including the addition of the legal counsel names, the Round Valley Indian tribes. I'll look to my colleagues if there's any questions, comments, or concerns. And for those folks who are following out there, this is really talking about a little perfunctory items to continue to have this board operate and function administratively. Anyone have any questions, comments, or concerns on that? If not, I could take a motion.
I move approval of the consent calendar.
Move to approve the consent calendar?
We have a motion and a second. Before we take our vote, I will ask if there's anyone from the public who'd like to speak on the consent calendar items, which are 5A through 5D. Seeing no one rise, I'll bring it back and just ask again for a voice vote. Those in favor of the consent calendar items, please say aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? Hearing no one opposed, that does pass unanimously with all present. And we'll move on going quickly to our informational briefings. 3 items today. The first one is the status of the Pacific Gas and Electric Potter Valley project decommissioning. And we have Pam Jean from Sonoma Water to make that presentation. Pam?
Well, I would love to share the presentation, but it's telling me I can't share my screen.
Ruh-roh. Want me to grab Marcy? Take this opportunity to get some more coffee.
It came up, so I think we're good. Where's my presentation? This one, yeah.
Coffee made out there.
Mhm. Thank you to Marcy. Okay, ready? First of all, let me just introduce myself. I'm Pam Jean, Assistant General Manager of Water Operations and Maintenance at Sonoma Water. And I've been working on this project for a long time. Really happy that we've gotten to this point as voiced by the entire board today. So I'm going to provide a really brief status update of the surrender process that PG&E is going through on the Potter Valley project, and also give you a little bit of context for how the proponents who submitted a proposal in the fall, which includes everybody that's sitting at the dais up there, the parties that are sitting at the dais up there, how it fits into that schedule. So as you know, PG&E decided to surrender its Federal Energy Regulatory Commission license for the Potter Valley project. And what's shown on this slide here is the hard deadlines that PG&E submitted to FERC and was approved by FERC about 1.5 years ago. The first deadline that PG&E did meet was met in November of last year with the release of an initial draft, a surrender application and conceptual decommissioning plan. So it's quite a mouthful. PG&E was on schedule to do that in November, release it in November. They did do that. And in order to meet that deadline, PG&E announced that any party that was interested in owning, operating all or part of the project had to submit a proposal to PG&E by the end of July of last year. I'll speak to our response to that announcement in the next couple of slides. So in June of 2024, per the schedule that you see here, PG&E will release for a public review a final draft surrender application. And our understanding is that PG&E anticipates that this will be more or less a final product that might be tweaked before the final product, which is due to FERC according to their schedule in January of 2025. So in response to PG&E's announcement last year that it would consider proposals for alternative outcomes through the license surrender process, Round Valley Indian Tribes, Mendocino County Inland Water and Power Commission, and Sonoma Water submitted a proposal to PG&E last summer. Immediately after submission, the partners began to work to meet the timelines I just shared with you. So on October 9th of 2023, PG&E did announce that they had made a non-binding acceptance of the proposal, which would allow for continued discussions and public comment. Before and after October, the partners talked to numerous interested parties about the proposal, recognizing that it will likely be changed over time as we are just at the beginning of the license surrender process. One of the first tasks completed was formation of this authority today, that was meeting today. But we also have been convening a table to negotiate. The proposal also says that we would convene a table to negotiate a settlement agreement. That work was initiated, and there has been a lot of time spent speaking with other stakeholders. So as I said, with that proposal did require us to go out and spend quite a bit of time speaking with other key stakeholders, and required us to actually garner support from agencies such as National Marine Fisheries Service, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and representatives of governmental and non-governmental organizations. So to that end, we met with a lot of key stakeholders, and thanks to a process led by California Department of Fish and Wildlife, Director Chuck Bonham, and the Round Valley Indian Tribes, 4 additional key stakeholders joined the original proponents, and we submitted a revised proposal to PG&E on November 7th of 2023. The revised proposal establishes principles that will guide the coalition to negotiate terms and conditions related to construction of water diversion facility at Cape Horn Dam site. Such a facility would be designed and constructed to ensure reliable water supplies to the Russian River and protect restored and degraded Eel River fisheries. The essential principle is that PG&E would remove the project dams. This is Cape Horn Dam and Scott Dam on the Eel River, and the regional entity would construct replacement facility at Cape Horn Dam site in a manner that does not delay PG&E's work. So the coalition intends to negotiate a license surrender agreement stating these principles in detailed terms, and in accordance with the revised proposal, that agreement is supposed to be completed by the end of November of this year. In addition, that revised proposal also speaks to focus on regional outcomes. The specifics still remain to be determined on what that is, but it could include ensuring, for example, protecting tribal cultural interests and ensuring PG&E's plan provides adequate restoration of Scott Dam and the Cape Horn Dam sites once they're removed. So on November 17th, 2023, PG&E did release their initial draft license surrender application, which included several measures proposed by the coalition. This was a relatively high-level conceptual draft and was not submitted to FERC. It was really released for public comment. Public review is complete at this point, and we understand that comments received by PG&E should be posted to their website, the Potter Valley Project Surrendered website, within a few days. The project proponents are pleased that the revised proposal was included, and even at a very high level, and the decommissioning plan the conceptual decommissioning plan described 2 options being studied for ongoing diversions and fish passage, and David will be describing those to you in the next presentation. According to PG&E's schedule, the consultations with tribes and resource agencies will take place between now and July. And in June, PG&E is expected to release its final draft surrender application with comments due approximately 6 weeks later in mid-July. PG&E will then at next January, about this time next year, file that application with FERC. And formally begins the hearing on license surrender for the project. So hopefully that provides a little context for you as to where we're at, both in implementing the revised proposal as well as where PG&E is at on the surrender process. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
I will look to my colleagues and see if there's any questions to staff on this particular item. Director Gore.
January 2025. And then what?
January 2025 is when.
And then what?
And then what? I'm not a FERC expert.
Yeah,
Janet's been through this before. Maybe she can describe it a little bit better, but at that point, the real sort of regulatory process
Yeah.
with FERC starts.
Yeah.
So,
but it was to renew a license rather than surrender a license.
Right,
so-
and my only experience with that is that there are two timelines when it comes to what we've done in all of the years I've been engaged with the Potter Valley project and the relicensing. When FERC gives you a time frame, it's usually 30 days or 60 days to comment. And then it goes back to them into whatever FERC's big black organizational box is.
Mhm.
And we really don't know what the time frame is when we'll hear back from them. And so we honestly don't know when FERC might come up with their final order for this project, which will direct PG&E how to proceed in the license decommissioning. So
Yeah.
that's not a real good answer, but that's
No.
the only one I have.
The one I expected. It's interesting because a lot of this is we're going to get a facilities assessment. They want to talk about a status of a grant application to Bureau of Reclamation. But a big part of this status is also just an idea of 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, how that changes if litigation is involved by different parties. Obviously, I'd say that very openly, not expecting a formal answer, but I think a part of this is also not referenced up there, but understanding that this is a decommissioning and a surrender process. So there's something that is not currently on the agenda, but would be a different water right through state water board process that would have to start concurrently at some point in the future. Not now, it was before.
It must be the rain, just knocking out all the technology.
yeah,
today.
there we go. So there are a number of, now it's working. There are a number of processes that have to happen that we know about. PG&E has stated in the past, and I don't know if this is still their position, but they have stated in the past that they are hoping to have an order in 2028. So that gives you a little bit, an order from FERC in
Okay.
2028. So that
Thank
gives
you.
you a little bit of context on timeframe.
That's great. Maybe by the time we do this, Jacob Gore will be standing up here instead of James Gore.
Anyone else have any questions to staff? Director McCurdy.
Just a quick comment. So this is a relay race where we're planning for a water system for the next 100 years. And I guess we're going to have to be patient. That's my thoughts.
No choice but to be patient, I believe as well. Any other directors have any comments? No, we're good. If it's okay with the public, we want to take a public comment, but let's, if we can, roll through the 3 informational items because I think everything will kind of be a little more packaged together and then we can take public comment. So we'll move on to 6B, which is the facilities assessment process. And we have David Manning from Sonoma Water to make this presentation.
Thank you. Let's see. Yes, I believe that's working. Thank you, Chair Rabbit. I'm David Manning, Environmental Resources Manager for Sonoma Water. I've been working on our latest round of Potter Valley project collaboration that's been referenced here for, I think, about 7 or 8 years, somewhere along those lines. We're very happy to be at this phase and share with you some of the developments in the 2 alternative water diversion and fish passage facilities that are under consideration for this new venture. In today's presentation, I'm going to give you a bit of a background about some of the previous work that we've done, and we'll jump into the two alternatives that are on the table now. Talk about a technical advisory group that's been formed to help us determine which of those two facilities works best from a fisheries and an engineering perspective. Talk about how those facilities are being evaluated, and then some of the next steps. So I think it's referenced here is the two-basin solution. Congressman Huffman formed back in 2017 an ad hoc committee to look at, during the time PG&E was still considering relicensing the facility, ways to get fish past both dams, Cape Horn Dam and Scott Dam, in a safe and efficient manner, also allow water supply to continue. And a committee was formed of a group of experts, many of which are still working on this project. And a number of alternatives were considered, really with the focus on Scott Dam, because of course it's a complete barrier to fish migration. So things such as a new fishway, trap and haul, where fish are captured and moved above the dam staying in place, either partially or completely, were considered. One of the recommendations from that group is that sort of the less that's in the way of the fish in the river, the better. And the ultimate recommendation was to remove, if we want to improve fish passage to the maximum extent, both Scott and Cape Horn Dam. Along came the effort that Pam mentioned for the two-basin solution partners to try to make some plans around that concept, with maybe the idea of taking over the license. And a bunch of engineering reports were created using grant funds from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife that looked at ways the dam could be removed. This report was produced in 2021. All this material is available online. Also, the ecological effects of dam removal and a new flow regime on both the Eel River and the Russian River, as well as a focused look specifically at Cape Horn Dam and how fish passage could be improved there. We now know, of course, that the project is headed toward decommissioning. PG&E is proposing to remove both facilities. So the attention now is really on how to make modifications to Cape Horn Dam to have it best serve the needs of providing water supply and meeting the needs of fisheries on the Eel River. And if you're not familiar with the site, I'm going to use this pointer and these images to point out a couple of key features. The dam itself, which of course you see on the right-hand side of the image here, is in this part of the river channel, and the diversion is upstream of it. The actual Van Arsdale Tunnel, where water enters the tunnel and diversion via gravity, is located upstream. There's some important structures from a fish passage perspective, something called the Fish Hotel. That is actually what it's called. It's the entrance to the ladder to allow fish to migrate upstream past the dam. This is a very old facility. This dam was first constructed in 1907. The ladder was built soon after and has been retrofitted and modified repeatedly by PG&E over time. So features such as this fish hotel and some other fish passage elements have been there at the site for 20 years or so. All of those facilities really don't meet, because of the age of the facility and its planning, don't meet any modern fish passage criteria. This is a view of a couple of segments of this ladder. This is, I believe, the longest fish ladder in the state of California at this time, to give you an idea of how antiquated it is. The dam height itself is about 50 feet. So fish need to ascend this. And it's not as challenging for them to ascend it in those low flow conditions as it is when the river looks like this, right? So this is a high flow event. In 2019, for scale and perspective, you can see an excavator here in the foreground. One of the issues with this fish facility is when the river gets really high, the facility fills with sediment and debris. Here's an image of that same fish hotel on the left-hand side of what that entrance to the ladder looks like clear, and what it looks like after a storm, and what that pool and weir portion of the ladder looks like after a big storm. Fish cannot get through that gravel. The fish ladder simply does not function well, and fish passage must be improved at the site. So several alternatives were considered through the 2021 studies. One of them was construction of a new fish ladder. Another was a diversion far upstream, and I don't expect anyone to pay attention to this figure. There's a lot of information in the report. Please visit it to learn more about those alternatives. But two alternatives came to the fore through this initial process that seemed to hold some promise for passing fish and also providing water supply. And those are the two alternatives that we'll describe today. And they're here in the middle of this sort of evaluation matrix table that you find in that 2021 report. The first of those alternatives involves removing Cape Horn Dam and replacing it with a pump station. We're calling that alternative E2. It involves removing a large portion of the dam and the fish barrier, that fish hotel, reducing the dam height by 44 feet, constructing, and that's essentially to the elevation of the natural river channel below the dam. So it really is removing that spillway portion of the dam, constructing a pump station at that former dam site to take water upstream to the location of the current diversion at the tunnel, and then let gravity take over from there. So it's mechanical pumping out of the river to get water to the tunnel so that it can then flow via gravity to the Russian River side. We can see what that looks like in plan view. Again, this is that same image that you saw previously, but instead of the dam being in place here, you have a facility that houses several screens, large pumps and motors that connect to what would be a buried conduit or pipeline that goes upstream to that diversion facility. This area that you see hatched here on the river left side of the channel is currently impounded water behind the reservoir. That would be dry ground. That would be a combination of rock and bioengineered materials, no longer river channel. In fact, the entire impoundment that makes Van Arsdale Reservoir right now would revert to a natural river channel. So the channel itself would be narrower. You wouldn't see that large slow pool now. The river would be flowing freely past the site. You can see what that looks like in cross-section view. Again, all these images are available for study. This image actually appears in the draft license surrender application that PG&E introduced in November that we expect an update of soon, as Pam mentioned. This view is looking at the location of the rest of the dam for this E2 alternative, the left side of the river on the left side of the image. Everything that you see shaded in pink or in dark gray are features that are removed, either concrete from the dam that's removed or bedrock material that's removed. The pump and diversion facility would be located right here. So built into the side of the river, not in the river channel itself, and the river flows naturally right through the site. Here's an example of what a facility like that might look like from another large dam removal project. This is a vision of these vertical cylindrical fish screens on the outside of a diversion facility from the Elwha River in Washington State. This is a very large dam removal, very successful. Our engineering consultants envision screens and a pumping system not unlike that for the Eel River. The third, alternative 3 that was considered takes a different approach. So instead of mechanically pumping that water up to the diversion tunnel, we let gravity continue to supply that diversion and bring fish upstream to that diversion point using something called a roughened channel. So that involves lowering the dam height substantially, but leaving some elements of the dam and some other structural components that we've built into the river channel in place and filling the channel with very large diameter rocks. So you're taking advantage of that gravity diversion upstream. You're allowing fish to swim through a boulder cascade that's composed of 5 to 15 foot diameter boulders, 800 feet long at a slope of about 3%. This is a fish passage technique that has been used elsewhere. This is a very large example of that, and it's a little bit innovative in that way, but it has been shown to be effective in other places. We can see natural correlates to what that would look like in the Eel River Canyon itself. So this is downstream of the existing Cape Horn Dam and Scott Dam. This is a natural roughened part of the main stem Eel River. And you can see the size of the materials there. There is a human in this image, I think right about there. So we're talking about very large natural material in the Eel River Canyon. Swift velocities that prevail there already. Fish successfully migrate past this point, and this is the inspiration for this roughened channel approach. So let's take a look at that same image again. Here, instead of that, seeing the screens and the pumping happening at the site of the former dam, that now takes place at the current site of the intake to the diversion tunnel. So in a similar fashion, there are screens affixed to the outside of this facility. But what you see in the river channel itself, sort of trace this line down the center here, that is a new channel at a 3% slope filled with large boulders. There are acres of large rock through this site, and fish swim up it as if they were swimming through a natural cascade on the river. There are a few features that you'll see sort of crossing this channel, and those are buried structural elements to keep this entire facility intact and in place. In cross-section view, there is no concrete structure here. This is essentially what the river, all again, the pink, the dark gray, removed material. What you see is a very natural looking channel shape in the place of the former dam. And there are some examples, albeit much smaller, of this same kind of approach, even right here in the Russian River watershed. So this is a Trout Unlimited project constructed in 2016 at the site of a former dam on Mill Creek, which is in the Dry Creek watershed here in the Russian River. You can see the former concrete from the dam here. It's been notched and lowered. But this channel that fish swim up, this high energy boulder-filled channel, is a roughened channel. The scale of this is obviously much smaller to the tributary stream, but it's the same concept we would apply to the Eel River. So the technical advisory group is composed of biologists, engineers, water managers from the organizations that you see listed here, many of whom are also proponents and partners, but some that are not, like the National Marine Fisheries Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, coming together some 30 individuals to help us think about how this facility can work in the future. Holding 10 meetings, started back in July of last year, looking at the conceptual designs, advancing those two alternatives when we first started this process, keeping the fish ladder option, like retrofitting that fish ladder at Cape Horn Dam, was still a consideration. Through the work of this group, we decided that that was not going to be advanced to the next phases of consideration. We're looking at fish passage criteria, things like hydraulic models. There's a preliminary engineering report. And now we're getting to the phase where we're screening alternatives and getting ready to score those alternatives and recommend one. And we hope to do that in March of 2024. So very briefly, the evaluation criteria, and I won't go into the matrix of them now. They're still in draft. They've been shared with the technical advisory group, but we're working on them. They assess the viability of upstream fish passage, downstream fish passage. They look at habitat, the resiliency and reliability of the site from both the fish passage and an engineering perspective and a water diversion perspective, the constructability of either of these two alternatives, and their cost, of course. So from the fish passage perspective, it's important to look at how the facility would function for each species under consideration, and not just the species, but their life stages and when they're present at the site. So Chinook salmon, steelhead, as juveniles, as adults, in the summer, in the winter, Pacific lamprey, and other native species are considered in this evaluation process. And as a last slide, or second to last slide, I thought I'd mention, taking a look at one of those species, one of those iconic species that will pass through this site, Chinook salmon. They're important to both basins. And I think it's something to mention, especially since we're talking here about an Eel-Russian project authority, to recognize the benefits to the Chinook salmon population that is really sharing the habitat both in the Eel and the Russian River. The California coastal Chinook salmon population is considered by the National Marine Fisheries Service to be essentially its own species inhabiting this part of the California coast. The image at the top is from the 1970s until 2022, counts at the Cape Horn Dam Ben Arsdale fishery station, the fish ladder counts. On the lower panel, you see counts from the Russian River Mirabel Dam fish ladder. The overlap is deliberate. We started monitoring Chinook salmon on the Russian River back in 2000. You can take a look at both these figures. They have different scales. They're collected on different rivers, but there are some noticeable patterns in the abundance of these fish. They are sharing an ecosystem in the ocean. They're responding to the same kinds of hydrologic cues. Restoring and recovering this threatened population of fish really relies on continued restoration work in both watersheds and the continued diversion from the Eel to the Russian River is important for Russian River Chinook salmon to continue their productivity and prevent their slide to extinction. So some next steps. Right now, the grant that we're implementing is from the California Department of Water Resources, and it's paying for a lot of the engineering work associated with this diversion facilities assessment. We have some more technical advisory meetings coming up soon. We're about to get a full draft of the report at the end of February. Several meetings to score the criteria and again, recommend an alternative by the 15th of March. We also hope that that same technical advisory group can help guide some of the operating rules for this new facility. So take a look at the diversion criteria for extracting water from the eel. Under what circumstances is that appropriate for protecting Eel River resources? How does the facility function? And we're very much hopeful that the same professionals in that group will help us in that next phase. We're also going to be advancing that one recommended design to the 60% design phase using grant funds from the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. And my colleague, Brad Sherwood, is going to share with us some details about that process after I can answer any initial questions, if you would like.
No, thank you very much. I think if it's okay again with my colleagues, I think Brad, you want to take 6C, which is the status of the grant application, and then we'll come back for questions from the board and also open it up for public comment on these 3 items.
While we're waiting for that, maybe a request would be to print that presentation so we can put it in these books. I would actually offer up that we could do that now. I don't know, maybe Chris, you could help us out. That presentation, I don't know if Melissa James can do it, but we could get copies of hole punches of that presentation. Maybe even print up some extra ones for others. But I was just going to say that would be, that was excellent information. Maybe you could help out.
And through the chair, the presentations will be posted online. They just were not available in time to get that done before the meeting.
Some of us do like our paper. Especially when you have it all in one spot and can track it that way. Yeah. Thank you, Chris. Here. Yeah.
Okay, we're good to go, I believe.
Thank you.
All right. Brad Sherwood, Assistant General Manager at Sonoma Water for Business Services and External Affairs Divisions. First and foremost, I want to thank the board for this amazing historic moment. Been working with my colleagues here for quite a while on this project, and it's nice to be here. Also like to thank our grant-funded team at Sonoma Water and all the stakeholders who made this presentation possible and this grant funding opportunity possible. In specific, Joan Holtberg, Bradley Elliott from Sonoma Water. Thank you to our grants funded team. Filling out the application, getting the letters of support, doing the paperwork side of this. It's a lot of work, and they are very passionate about what they do. So thank you to the team behind the folks here at the dais who help make this work every day. So we did receive notice from the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation in December of 2023, December 19th, $2 million grant to Sonoma County Water Agency to study diversion from the Eel River to the Russian River that will have the least possible impact on salmon and steelhead. As you can see, we are advancing that grant forward. The project, as Dave said, will bring one project up to 60% design stage. I'm going to be very brief with this presentation so we can get the Q&A. Implementation is being worked on again by Joan and Brad of our grants funded team. Sonoma Water has been in contact with Bureau staff on completing pre-award tasks, such as submitting pre-award cost share incurred to date. I believe there's a rough estimate of about $400,000 that we've incurred to date to achieve our cost share goal of 35% on this particular grant. Other pre-award tasks we completed include environmental review and a budget analysis and business evaluation review. We anticipate to execute a grant agreement with the Bureau by the end of April of 2024. And when the current preliminary design is complete under the DWR grant funding, which Dave mentioned, a RFP will be issued for a consultant to complete the 60% design as described in the Bureau grant. And this is anticipated to begin the process of March or April of this year. This couldn't have been done. We couldn't have been here without our partners, without our community, without support. Thank you to Congressman Huffman. This came out of the bipartisan infrastructure bill. This team really created this opportunity for us here today. So we wanted to make sure and say thank you. And we look forward to continued collaborations on this grant as we work to complete it and get it out into the community to begin work. I also want to briefly just say that we do have a authority website, and hopefully the community is aware of that. We will be posting all meeting information at this website, Eel-Russian-authority.org. And per your actions today, Sonoma Water will continue to update that website as a part of our secretaries of the authority. So with that, that is a very brief presentation, and happy to answer any questions.
Appreciate that very much. Thank you. And I'll look to my colleagues. Really, any questions on the last three presentations that we've had? Director Gore.
I was just going to start by saying David's presentation is way better than yours. Got better maps, better visuals. Yeah, so so I want to go back, if I can, to Mr. Manning, your presentation and a couple of the underlying elements that haven't been discussed here today, but I think are important to bring up whoever wants to address them. The first thing is that the two alternatives that were went downriver. I'll try to keep my puns appropriate. Any comments on those, why they did? Or just high level, not looking for a big, huge briefing, but why they were seen as not viable to move to this next step?
Sure. I hope folks can hear me. Very good. So the first alternative was reconfiguring the fish ladder. I think there was quite a bit of skepticism that a fish ladder of that length, even a newly constructed one, would be efficient at passing fish upstream. There are issues still with the presence of the reservoir in Van Arsdale, harboring habitat for predators, maybe changing water quality. There's a lot of concern about how effective a continued fish ladder would be, given the experience that all the agencies have had for decades and decades trying to make the existing one work. So it really, our engineers and biologists from the resource agencies and the NGO community did not think highly of that concept. The fourth concept is not unlike the roughened channel. It's just much, much larger and much more expensive potentially. We're talking about building a roughened channel past the site of the existing facility, creating a new diversion intake facility and sending that water back downhill to the existing diversion facility. It involves some 9 acres of rock, which is kind of hard to imagine, honestly. It involves some private property and some extensive work that would have to be done to stabilize the channel, the location of this new diversion facility across a very wide floodplain. So there were some real engineering challenges there, as well as I think, property ownership challenges that just made that project less viable in the eyes of our team.
Good. Other question is, there was a lot of differences of opinion on what PG&E's stance was with their obligation to remove either Scott Dam, which we're not talking about today, or this. And there was a lot of discussion about if that really meant they were going down to the water line, if they were going underneath, it's everything. What is our current assumption about PG&E's commitment as a part of the agreement of how much of this is on them versus how much of it is over on us as an authority?
I might let Pam, you want to try tackling that question? My opinion is I don't think we know enough about PG&E's plans at this point
Yeah.
to answer that question.
I just remember there was a clarification at one point, Huff, less about the latter part of that and more about, there was an assumption that by some individuals that dam removal meant underwater facilities as well. It's a part of the initial announcement by PG&E, which was not the case when PG&E clarified that position, is what I remember. And I'm just trying to confirm that.
Yeah, you're right. I don't remember the exact wording that they
Yeah.
used, but it kind of didn't say complete removal, which is,
Yeah.
I think, what was out there, not necessarily by PG&E. So they did clarify that, and I'm trying to remember, we got that clarified back in the fall, but I can't remember exactly
Yeah, I can't
where we presented that, so.
And I guess the final part of this that came up was, you talked about the design, but really how much of this is integrated with the run of the river scenario, like when you ultimately take water and at what CFS level? Part of our conversation is that the current facility can't take water above 7,000 CFS. So how much of the design takes into when water is moving as much as what it is?
So that is one of the design criteria for the facility, is that it can take water when it's available and environmentally appropriate to do so from the eel. So the concept that you mentioned, the run of the river, is still the way the diversion would function.
Okay.
So during the wintertime, there's abundant flow in the Eel River. Both of these facilities are capable of diverting water, as well as what we call the shoulder seasons. So the spring, the fall, when there's not the very lowest summer flow, but there is still some flow that can be diverted at a modest rate without impacting resources in the Eel River. And that's the work that will be forthcoming. And some of it has already started. The consultants for the Round Valley Indian tribes have begun thinking about that process. These facilities will be flexible enough to take a relatively small amount of water and the very large winter flows.
And I think the final thing is just it's understanding that the Bureau of Reclamation work is both in terms of the planning dollars that are coming to take the DWR initial up to 30%, to take this up to 60% or 70%, and then to continue to move forward. It's predicated on going after more Bureau of Reclamation money for finishing up that ultimate design, but also construction. And then just an understanding that construction is still an open question about how much that costs and how much of that is provided by the federal government, state, local partners, and all of these other things. So it's a lot to be decided by this authority and others, correct?
Correct. So what we've applied for is Part A of the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation grant program. Part B provides for construction dollars, up to $20 million of federal money for constructing ecosystem restoration projects, fish passage projects. The program right now, I believe, is authorized through the year 2028, maybe 2027. So in order to utilize those construction funds, it does help to have a planning project that goes to 60%. That's the maximum engineering design level that they'll pay for planning efforts. The later phases of design and construction are handled by that Part B. Once the money is received, if successfully received, applicants have 5 years to spend those funds. So there is a clock ticking a bit on the federal piece. I can't speak to any state potential contributions. I think that's to be decided.
That 20 million, is that 20 million capped per project, or can you go multiple years on it? I thought there was a consideration of
per project. The entire program was allocated somewhere in the realm of $250 million.
But the most we can anticipate for this project would be 20 million.
As the rules currently are structured, yes.
Thank you.
From federal.
Director McCourty.
So I have 2 questions. One of them is on energy and carbon footprint. Is that part of the criteria for your evaluation? Because one has pumps and one has gravity. And are you calculating out over time also the cost of operating such a facility? And the second thing is, what happens to channel morphology when the other dam comes down and suddenly there's billions of yards of sediment coming through. Will this thing survive that?
So those are all excellent questions. The sort of energy efficiency of the site is not one of the criteria that we're considering initially in this evaluation, but the cost certainly is. So the operating cost, the cost of maintaining all of the mechanical systems, providing the power, those are all included in what we will see from our consultant in their final engineering report and what the advisory group will investigate. There will, of course, as this project moves forward, there are all kinds of environmental reviews that will be required looking at the impact of the facility itself. But right now, we're really trying to get a handle on what's feasible from an engineering and a fish passage perspective. And one of the most important factors there is how the site can withstand the changing sediment dynamics in the Eel River. The Eel River, even without the removal of the dam and the 17 million cubic yards of sediment behind Scott Dam, is a place that carries a very high both bed load and suspended load of sediment. So the geomorphology of the channel is something that we have some understanding about now. It's one of the evaluation criteria. In the next phase of design, some sediment transport modeling will be introduced that really helps refine our understanding and our planning of how the wave of sediment that will be in the channel from the removal of Scott Dam will affect both the short and long-term performance of either of these alternatives.
Director Russ.
This is probably for David as well. I know that our groups working together over the last few years have significant amount of studies that we worked on. But my question is were there any relevant studies that PG&E actually did in this area at your presentation? And if they did, did they share them with the group, and did you guys review them, or were you able to review them or look at them?
There has not been, at least in terms of what's relevant for these two alternatives, a lot of work that PG&E did prior to their filing the most recent draft license surrender application. Most of the information about sort of facilities and what the site looks like is information gleaned from the consultants working under the grant I mentioned from the Department of Water Resources. I'm sure there's a lot to come from PG&E. They will have quite a number of studies that they will have to fulfill as part of their surrender and decommissioning process. There is one piece of information about water temperature that PG&E collected that is useful. I think we are still awaiting some results from that investigation, but I'm not aware of others that are directly applicable to the two alternatives. And I'll ask that question of Pam too. Yeah.
So, I mean, that's why I said relevant, because their studies might not be relevant to what we're looking at as a group. So just a comment to you, not a question, is I feel that there was a lot of really good work done, and it was kind of cool to see all of the technical people that were named, you know, on the screen that were coming together and done this work. So I think you guys did a lot of really good work.
Thank you. And I can't say enough about your leadership and the consultants that you hired for Round Valley Indian Tribes are top-notch river scientists and really have been leading the way and conceptualizing these designs and studying the impacts of the Eel River. It's been a fantastic collaboration.
Great, thank you. Director Polly.
Yeah, I don't have a question. I just want to make a quick comment. For Pam, Dave, and Brad, thank you very much for doing an excellent job of synthesizing a really complicated process that we've been engaged in for all of this time. And I think if not anything else, we know that there's more to be done. There's a lot more to be done, but we're on a very tight timeline with regards to what PG&E is expecting to have from us. And the workload and the effort has been absolutely amazing. And I just want to thank you again for this.
Appreciate that very much. And just real quickly for myself, and I think that Director Cordy touched on it. I was just curious, and David, in terms of the scoring criteria, so that hasn't been necessarily weighted yet, I take it, and there's just those broader categories. Is that true?
what we have shared with that committee is a far more detailed version of that has individual criteria and a range of scores for those criteria and what they mean, how the scoring goes, and how each organization and party feels about the various criteria is what we will be discussing over the next 4 meetings of that technical advisory group. And we decided not to necessarily weight those factors. There are some that are probably have more information and maybe more important than others. That's one of the tasks that we've asked the technical advisory group members to help us determine which of those many criteria do they feel is most important. And we may get different perspectives from different organizations because of their leanings or their expertise. We look forward to the process. There are some examples of this. We engaged a similar committee and a process for the Huffman Ad Hoc Committee that I mentioned earlier. That was successful. We were able to, through some long meetings, come to some consensus around some of the scores and make some broad recommendations, not as much detail at that time as we have currently. So the engineering information we have to base some of these judgments on is much improved than where it was several years ago.
And I,
For the process.
yeah, and I appreciate that. And that's probably very appropriate, just having 2 options to look at and compare and contrast the 2. It's a lot more simpler than having a dozen that you're trying to score and weight and move forward on. So I do appreciate that. I am always kind of jumping ahead, unfortunately, like on the cost criteria, and totally agree that, wouldn't it be great to use gravity instead of pumps over the course of, long range. But we'll see how that all plays out, and want to make sure we go down that path and make the right decisions for the right reasons. So do appreciate that. If there's no more questions of staff or comments, I do want to take a moment to go to public comment. And the public comment today will be on the 3 informational items that were offered by Pam Jean, David Manning, and Brad Sherwood. And I'll look to, and I see Bob getting up there in the back. So please try to keep it as brief as you can, but get your point across. Excuse me.
Bobby Anderson,
Thank you.
resident of Healdsburg, and have provided the director's copy of remarks I would make and just underscore what the conversation you just had in terms of, I'm a fan of gravity. And I think we need to figure that out, how to make this project work, continue to work. Van Arsdale had it right. Gravity is our friend. So, we've been a long process, but in the end, underscore, you're going to get caught up in the next 100 days, all these decisions that have to be made. It's the next 100 years that I think you need to be thinking about. So I'm encouraged, appreciative of the 5 who get to make these decisions. I trust that you will, you're well familiar with all the issues, and it will be a struggle to land this ship. And I think you'll do well. We have a system that is largely natural, and we can make it more natural and offer the in-river structure in Healdsburg, to me, is a model. And what I saw in Ludlowville, New York, is something I think we can replicate here. When you design the structure for diversion, you hang out part of it, and you don't care about what water goes over the top. You care about creating the backwater, because it makes no sense to my simple mind to worry about everything that's in the river. Do a side channel, have a roughened side channel, do that upstream so that gravity feeds to the existing tunnel. And yes, you need to deal with PG&E and keep them happy and show that you're supportive of what they're proposing, but you don't need their facility to do what needs to be done. You need to be able to replicate Healdsburg's in-river structure upstream. I put it upstream of the road bridge, just to give you some sense of stay out of the reservoir area. Cape Horn will be gone. The river will function naturally, and you design it so that the low flows are always in the river, not accessible to the tunnel. And my second suggestion is think about the money and the water, because this project's only going to work once we design, get past all of this conversation. How much water is available? What will you charge? And I put my name at the bottom of the sheet. I have no idea if anybody else believes those are good numbers. But if you were to spend $150 million, I can show you a way how you would fund it and not charge everybody the same amount, because Potter Valley can't afford to pay the same amount that the city of Healdsburg can afford to pay.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate that.
Good afternoon. Ross Liscombe, on behalf of the Sonoma County Alliance and our Water Supply Committee. We've been watching the Potter Valley issue closely for a long time now. We're very supportive of this JPA and look forward to finding a regional solution that benefits stakeholders and provides sustainable water solutions for our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. Appreciate that. Is there anyone else in the chambers who would like to speak to this body? Seeing no one rise, I'll bring it back, and we'll move on then to item 7, which is new business action items. And the first most important thing is to set our meeting schedule going forward. And I think, Corey, are you going to handle this one for us?
I would be happy to. Thank you. I don't have any shiny pictures or cool presentation here. And in fact, because we have not yet been able to actually set dates, what I would propose to the board today is to give direction to staff to set a regular meeting calendar, or to work to set a regular meeting calendar to meet every other month, alternating between Sonoma and Mendocino counties, as much as feasible. And that would give us the opportunity for staff to continue the very important coordination work with your busy schedules to get an actual set dates and locations made in time for the March meeting, and then adopt the calendar there. As noted in some of the presentations, the technical advisory group is meeting on March 11th to hopefully make final recommendation on the selected preferred project that we would present as a group to PG&E, and your board needs to hear about that. So the March meeting would be after that date is what we propose, and then alternating every other month from there. So if anybody has any questions, but in the meantime, I would recommend that we table the adoption of a resolution setting the calendar of meetings until next meeting. But in the meantime, if that type of schedule is amenable to the board, staff would be able to take that and work on it some more.
That is, sounds ideal. And I'll look to my colleagues, make sure that there's consensus on that. I think that's direction to staff. I will say, just to make sure that we take into account whatever parking needs to take place, so that we make sure our guests here, or vice versa, know where they're supposed to be and park and everything. So we have some restrictions around that sometimes get in the way. So I appreciate that.
Comment noted. I would also just think this, if I may, Chair Rabbit, an opportune time to thank Melissa James and Kat Thurman for all their work getting this meeting together, scheduling your busy schedules, and getting the materials together and posted. It is a team effort, and we are, as you know, a brand new organization trying to wing it as best we can. So appreciate the patience and all of their help.
Duly noted, and thank you both for all the great work, and do appreciate it is like herding cats around here to get everyone. And it takes a lot of work. Director McCourty?
Just a quick comment on parking in the Mendocino Admin Center. First of all, you can pretty much park anywhere because there's no enforcement. And it's true. And then unless you park in the sheriff's spot, you might have a problem. But
Yeah.
pretty much anything else is all right. And there is parking adjacent to where the board chambers are. That's pretty easy to find a place.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much. We'll move on to,
I was just going to say, that's probably why Mendocino County doesn't have as much money as Sonoma does. We don't charge anybody very much for parking where they're not supposed to be.
let's move on real quickly to items for the next meeting agenda. I think Corey just mentioned the most important one we'll probably be talking about, which is the kind of the preferred alternative of what comes out of the technical advisory committee. I'll look to my colleagues and see if there's any other suggestions for what else should be on the agenda. Director Gore, do you have something?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is that this, I think understanding that the process in between now and this happening, whatever that means in terms of the general concept of what was provided, this corollary timeline, which will include some kind of a state water right ability to run something in the future. And just, I don't want to ask for too much staff time to go into something, but I'm just interested in other processes in FERC. Not just us saying we don't know and this is what we've seen before. I know we have consulting teams and, in DC and others. And I would just, even if it's at this point anecdotal, just to kind of grasp the larger picture of this is what's happened in this watershed. This is what happened in this. And if there aren't other examples, it'd be nice to know that too, that we're doing this. So just context is helpful. We talk very detailistic or very detailed on this all the time. And one of the things that I always try to get back to people is what's the succinct plan, even if it's complex. So thank you.
Director McCourty?
Kind of building on that, and I realize this is going to take a little time, but starting to think about what do we do with this water once it comes across the mountain? Where do we put it? Because that's a really complex picture. Whether it be some years there won't be room in Lake Mendocino to put it there because of its flood control functions. We also have Ukiah Valley Basin Groundwater Sustainability Agency that probably could play a role in some storage. There is going to be need for other facilities in Potter Valley. So at some point, we really have to have a sit down and talk about what is the actual physical layout of the diversion once it gets across the mountain. And we've been thinking, of course, all of our time has been spent on the Eel River logically, but it's going to take a pretty good strategic thinking to get this project to work properly. And the sooner you start, the better. My discussions with state officials have, when I started talking to them 2 years ago about this, they said, get an entity, then we can talk. So now we have an entity, it's time to talk. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yeah. Please, Director Russ.
So just for clarification, we're looking at items for the next meeting agenda.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. I'd like to see some of the these studies that are coming on. I know most of them are in process, but if we could have updates to those, the ones that are relevant to this board or committee, that they could be added. As time goes along, because it's good to stay up on that. And also, I'm not sure the comment about, what may be happening in other areas. There are other projects going on right now for dam removal. It may behoove us to take a look at some of that information to see. It may not exactly fit with what's going on in the Eel-Russian River situation, but it might be helpful in looking at some of their long-term things that they're looking at, and they've been doing it for over 20 years, so that might be helpful too. So just a suggestion. And then just a comment on, just to be really, you know, straightforward. And that is, I've never sit on a board where we had to be ruled by, the Brown Act. And so I just want to let my colleagues know that, it's new for me. My meetings are, you can do whatever the hell you want to do. On the res, anything goes. No, I'm just joking about that. But anyway, there is a little meeting decorum. But anyway, and I talked to Corey about that, and she's volunteered to give me some information so I can educate myself. So if I make something that's that goes against the Brown Act, I apologize firsthand, beforehand, and I will try to get up to speed with that too.
I appreciate that very much. And I'm sure Corey can give you a one pager on the high level items on the Brown Act. And it's obviously it's a requirement that we all accept. And sometimes it's also, yeah, it is what it is. All for the good reasons. As for myself, I do think that kind of and I want to make sure that we stay on track with what we need to do by certain dates. And I think that the items like you showed today and the overviews, but thinking about what Glenn said regarding the storage pieces, and I still always, and looking at Bob's numbers on that second page, kind of that higher level, even if we're not to me, it helps put the scale and scope of what we're doing into some sort of context, and recognizing how we're going to have a business plan in place at some point. Because you don't want to ever design something, I think, that is going to be prohibitively expensive to operate. And so, however we touch on that, and I know we don't have to dive deep because we're not going to be making those final decisions per se soon. It would be great if we can kind of keep that in mind too. With that, I think if there's anyone from the public who'd like to speak on our meeting schedule and or agenda items, and I thank you for not rising. I will bring it back and we'll go to the council report. And Corey, earlier there was a request to kind of touch on the agreement that's in place and maybe a higher level, and make sure that everyone here is familiar with what we've agreed to and how we're going to operate.
Absolutely. Thank you. Late last year, the boards of the Mendocino County Inland Water and Power Commission and the County of Sonoma and Sonoma County Water Agency approved a joint exercise of powers agreement to form this entity that you all are chairing today or sitting on today, the Eel-Russian Project Authority. In that agreement, in addition to representatives of what we call the member agencies, the signatory parties, which were the three that I just mentioned, there was also a board member seat for the Round Valley Indian tribes. And the tribal council appointed James Russ, who is here with us today, to serve in that capacity. As Chair Rabbit noted at the beginning of the meeting, one of the terms in the joint exercise of powers agreement is the voting requirement. Essentially, all actions take a majority vote unless by law they need a 4/5. And as part of the JPA, we have structured it such that there needs to be an affirmative vote of a representative from Mendocino County Inland Water and Power Commission, as well as an affirmative vote of either the Sonoma County representative or the Sonoma Water representative. And that was to ensure that we also couldn't have too many. This is, as we've all discussed, not going to work unless we all work together, and we came at it with that. But there was also just a little bit of protections in place for everybody if we did it that way, and that's what the boards approved. In addition to that, you've already talked about what the purposes of this entity are. Vice Chair Pauly explained that at the beginning with a quote from the Joint Powers Authority agreement itself. I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the agreement, but that is generally how it operates. As Director Rust just pointed out, is obviously a Brown Act body. It is a special district under the joint under California law. So we are here following the Brown Act, and we'll continue to do so.
Great. And I'll look to my colleagues to see if there's anything, any questions or anything further to emphasize with Corey's report. Not seeing any. Do you
I
have
actually
something
thought of
else? Yeah.
something else I should explain, and I apologize because I think I talked to each of you about this separately, but the agreement itself also sets up for this interim period, the ERPA, or the authority, however we all want to refer to it, does not have its own staff at this juncture. That is something that could happen in the future. So Sonoma Water and IWPC's staff and council are working together to, as we say, wing it at this beginning juncture. In addition, the agreement itself also establishes that because at this interim initial stage, there isn't general counsel, that counsel for the County of Sonoma, me, and Scott Shapiro, who is a special counsel to IWPC, would serve as kind of co-general counsel until such time as the board appoints anybody else. So that is why I am sitting here today. We let Scott go on vacation, so he'll take the next one, I think.
All right, great. Thank you. Again, looking at my colleagues, any follow-up? Not seeing any. If we're good to move on, this is the time for public comment on items not listed on the agenda, but within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board. This is a Brown Act requirement that we do. And Rue, please. Yeah.
Birch, and I live in unincorporated Sonoma County, and I have only 2 points to make. One of them is, bless you all, this is just phenomenal. For those of us who have watched PG&E dither for decades and finally decide that they were gonna, I guess their portfolio was full enough that they didn't need to have this anymore on their on their list. So I know that it's an enormous lift, and you and staff and all of the people who have been involved, many, because it's not just our county, it's just, all the way up the North Coast. It's an enormous amount of work, and I really look forward to having something wonderful come of it, because there's great opportunity here. Second thing I want to say is, somebody mentioned lawsuits and the length of time that could hurl a wrench into thing. My suggestion is one of the best ways to avoid lawsuits is to have absolutely as much transparency as possible. The more people understand, the less likely they are to object. And so I recognize there are some legal hurdles that you're going to have to meet. There are constraints involved with the law and this process. But as much information as you can make available, pushing it out, not just making it available, but pushing it out, the less likely there is to be objection later. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. Is there anyone else here who'd like to speak to this body? Seeing no one rise, I'll bring it back to the board and look to my colleagues. Moving on to board member announcements or any reports. Believe that we probably got most of that in earlier. Is there anything to add? I think, Ruth, thank you for your comments. And I think just on a parting shot, as just really appreciative of all the work to get to this point, and do believe that the collaboration and the outreach that has taken place and really kind of pulling everyone into the circle has been a wonderful thing. I think we're in as good a place as we could be at this particular point in time, but we all know that there's a ton of work to do going forward, and look forward to kind of pulling up our sleeves with you and moving us over the finish line to really make sure that we have the best systems for the two rivers going forward as possible. So really do appreciate everyone coming down for this inaugural meeting, and especially on this day when it's so wet outside, talking about water and the Potter Valley project here. So look forward to the next meeting. Look forward to advancing the alternatives and having those discussions and moving us along at a clip to make sure that we meet all the deadlines that are out there. And really do appreciate everyone being here today and participating. And hopefully with the presentations, you got a better overview of what's been happening and what's proposed and the alternatives in front of us. And although Brad's slides were not as nice as David's, I think Brad's slides also showed revenue coming in, which I think is most appreciated because everything on David's slides actually was going to cost money on the other side. So thank you for to the Bureau for the $2 million, to DWR for the getting us here. And we look forward to getting our nose under the tent to be able to get those construction dollars to be able to make this project financially feasible. So with that, we are adjourned until our next meeting. Thank you all.